exist without them. Okay. Well, since this is a tutoring situation that we are talking about, so it's not a lecturing, you know, when you have
at the back.
you can't hear it. Okay, and now if I speak a bit louder, okay.
This microphone is not amplifying the one that you.
So this one.
You should bring it a bit closer.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe now it's better. So this is a tutoring situation. It's not like we are in a big lecture room and I have 100 students. Yes, so sometimes I have 1, 2, or 3 students. So I think it's sort of unavoidable that the relationship is far more responsive to emotions. It's not the syllabus only. It's not the the readings, but it's the whole life of the students to a certain extent, as much as they want to, and of course as much as or insofar as the topics at question sort of allow or invite a discussion about in what way their experience, their life trajectory, or their biography informs, let's say, the readings in question. And I think it's extremely important, and I think it's probably in every single discipline. I can talk about sociology and social anthropology, that I think all the sexy readings that you have, the exciting readings, I think gain sort of depth, and you gain or you start really thinking when you are able to have this dialogue between your readings and your experience, and then the analytical framework that you get sort of I think helps to a great extent to sort of make sense of your experience, and then to become, I think, braver, and I often, I think, try to remind myself and students also that learning reading is an adventure. It's a discovery also. So it's not just meeting certain expectation that you have to, I don't know, put down something on the table, like in the sense of an end product like thesis or whatever, but it's an adventure, like learning and discovering and sort of understanding things should be also fun, and adventure. Yeah. So I think that's really, really important to kind of be able to enjoy the fact that you are learning, because I think that's an amazing thing to be doing, that you have the opportunity to talk about and think about questions that really interest you and vex you, and questions that are often extremely painful, but you have, let's say, your colleagues, you have your cohort. So and I think this is also extremely important, that although tutoring happens, a bit like in separate groups, there is the wider RGPP cohort and that was really lovely for me to see, like how students are caring for one another. So that was really, really amazing to see, like how they were sort of holding one another.
So before we were speaking all these days about the experiences of Roma students in education, like secondary and higher education, and maybe we should just acknowledge that most of the RGPP students might come from these backgrounds, like Carmen, Maria, many of them studied in segregated schools, so they come here also with more traditional type of education system, different learning styles, bad experiences. So maybe for many of them, RGPP is like the place where they feel more safe. So I think being a Roma tutor contributed a lot to making students more comfortable, more having more trust in the educational system, or at least here at CU. And whenever I start the class in the first week, I have something called like a class agreed guidelines or rules. Yeah, so we make like a list of what would be the principles that would guide us this year, like being honest, whatever students come up with. So that creates a bit of comfort and a safety space that kind of makes students more open, also making myself more vulnerable and open as well. So that I think it's very, very important to establish a certain level of confidence. Then I think it has to deal also with the discipline I'm teaching. Public policy, it's a bit more different than others, I would say. And most of the times, whenever we speak about a topic, we already connect it with Roma issues. And that's also becoming very emotional because there's not much positive, in public policy and Roma. So the topics also are becoming emotional. And we had different sorts of topics, sterilization of Roma women, violence, criminalization of Roma neighborhoods. And these are heavy topics, also for me, also for the students. So sometimes, just reading about this, listening, writing about this can really charge students emotionally. And it's just good as a tutor just to shake them a bit, like, it's fine, leave it aside for a while and then you come back to it when you feel prepared. So that's also like a strategy. And I think everything comes from the whole idea that classes are small, like 4 or 5 students, 1 student, and the students, what's happening. Everything we do is very student-centered, and you get to know what's actually happening. Of course, depends also whether the students allow that type of understanding and knowledge and so on. Then we also had a lot of conflicts and frustration. I had very diverse students, different levels of English, different backgrounds and so on. And conflicts are arising, you want it or not. And just because the class size is small, you can feel it in the class. When colleagues don't speak with each other, you don't have a class, because you cannot put them to work together. They don't react to what they said. So you feel it, like you have to address what's happening. And it's difficult for me, because many times I don't know what's happening, actually. So I'm trying to pretend that I don't know or I don't feel it. So you have to be smart to bring your class together, to work. And then there's also the issue of frustrations. We know, especially when the TOEFL deadlines are coming, people start panicking, saying why I came here, what I'm doing with my life, what should I do next. That's a reality check. So also MA application results. So that's also like difficult. You try to communicate, say I don't encourage them or whatever, but that's a lot, Plus the everyday kind of challenges, your luggage that you bring from home. So I think that there's quite a lot of aspects, and I think that's why taking care of the tutors is also important because it's a lot. And I'm not sure how I'm staying with the emotional intelligence. I'm not think I'm so good. I don't think I'm so good. So that would be something that teaching in this type of programs. I also taught in the Olive program, and that was like much more like difficult because refugee students, and it's a different level of trauma, of experience, and so on. But taking care of the tutors is also very important, you know, and or equipping them how to deal with the class dynamics and emotions.
Great, thanks. Guys, would you like to contribute? Oh, Petra, sorry.
Yes, thank you. So talking about emotions, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, there's a delay, that's why. So talking about emotions, I'd like to go back to the question of authority, which is central to decolonial thinking, like what we do with authority. I think there is an understanding that we cannot absolutely do away for good with authority. It's rather what we try to do, and I feel RGPP is doing that exactly, is a reframing of authority, so that authority wouldn't be based in privileges or entitlements given by race, caste, gender, class, education, but authority would be rooted in expertise and contextualized and would recognize its limitations. And I feel to get there, where we reframe authority in the classroom, can be an emotionally tasking process for both students and the educators. So Simona said that it creates a sense of a safe environment having a Roma tutor. I'm not of Roma background, so my attempt at reframing authority there was to always mark that I do not have certain experiences, and that actually I have huge, like, what do you call those, blind spots of my understanding of even Eastern European Roma experience. And I always felt that we arrived to a safe place with the students when they were able to talk to me through this, telling me, you might not know that. So that's when the mutual learning process was really established, where I wasn't the voice of authority as the tutor, but I was also someone who's checking and rechecking her experiences, her ingrained patterns, the prism through which I'm understanding the region, the texts. And then to say something about the text. So I'm a literary scholar by training, but then of course, learning for so long, studying for so long at the gender studies department, I became somewhat of a social scientist too, using interdisciplinary methods. And at the beginning, I felt much better. I felt more free working with literary texts in the RGPP classrooms, because I felt there we are really on equal footing, because when we are talking about a literary text, talking about a piece of poetry, everyone's perspective is equally valid. Everyone's experiences, everyone's emotions, everyone's feelings about the text are equally valid. So I really tried to bring in a lot of literary examples or watch movies, because I feel that has an empowering effect to feel that in the class, whatever I say from where I talk from is just as valid as the tutor's voice. And that we are from there to working with more hardcore scientific works. And then to recognize in the scientific texts that they just as well have perspective and biases and blind spots and all those other things that we recognize in each other, or that we recognize in an artwork, so that the scientific text is not an ultimate authority either, meaning to establish a critical relationship to the text. It was a long journey. And yes, to come back to what Judit said, this journey was often stalled, because when you are with one person or two more persons in a classroom and they have a terrible day, then you need to be ready to just drop the text and drop whatever you prepared for that day and deal with what's at the stake in that moment for them. So it was a multi-faceted process, but I really learned to trust the process itself through working with the students at RGPP.
Great, thank you. End of the day. End of conference. Shall I take this one as well?
Thank you very much for giving me all this fancy equipment. Try to stay louder. So yeah, I was always like I don't know, maybe it's because of my cultural gender upbringing, but I was like kind of hard with the idea of emotions in class, like what is that? But then I realized, I think I'm having an insight moment today. When you work close with a student or 2 or 3 students, you can never avoid of managing this emotional situation, because it's become more than just classwork. When you mentor, when you tutor, it's and I even imagined, like, from the point of view of students, how does it look? It's like you still, if you consider your tutor or mentor as an authority, it's like you spend every week, like how many, like 100 minutes, almost one-on-one, and in many cases it's like one-on-one with a person who is like an authority person, and you have to deal with it. So right now I'm more like, oh, they're so brave. They're so I know I think they can forget, or how would I say, like being more empathic than we are, if they can tolerate it, if they can bear it, our students. So yeah, and I then just realized that the first tool or skill is irony, and maybe having fun together about history, about other things. Sometimes I understand the things are very complicated. You should not have fun about it, and it's more like but with history it's possible sometimes, and I think it's also the setting of maybe this kind of ancient Greek model of Socrates and irony, whatever. Yeah, it happens. But also emotions, if we try to kind of theorize them just a bit, it's a part of our habitus, how it's called, like social patterns of emotions. And when we are close, we maybe almost like directly exchange and change each other's ways of behaving habitually, traditionally. And when you do it honestly, when you do it like you regularly do, but irony about that stupid bureaucracy, this guidelines are stupid, and you just laugh sometimes at the guidelines, or I know, like racism of some historians or ways of thinking. It helps you and your mentees, or your students to tune into the same I don't know, wave, or that's maybe like less, for me it's less about emotions, but more about having exchanging some vibes, as as people say these days. Like vibing together. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Vicky, would you like to say something?
About emotions.
Yeah.
So emotions, one thing is language, learning languages and emotions. Even for emotions, we need language. So that's 22. Not to mention that you mentioned TOEFL, and I think that's a very emotional time in the life of RGPP. But I would rather put it into another perspective, which might not seem emotional, but I think it to some extent is. That again, whether it's social science or teaching English, that we as teachers and the students and as learners, and of course it's not this clear cut, there is interactive learning, I mean, going both ways, as many of you have mentioned. But what we kind of have to teach is what is the norm and what is not the norm, whether it's social science or whether it's language. I mean, I guess in social science, you also say, okay, this is the more or less in which direction you will be accepted or taken seriously. And which are the directions which are still there and might be even more interesting, but they are not right now, not as prestigious on the market or whatever as the others. And language is the exact same. And this is why where TOEFL comes, that it is not the language, it is not you. It is something you have to know this for TOEFL, you have to know this for other things. And we people use languages in a very, very idealistic way, even your mother tongue, so you will have your own English. So it's very, very complex. I don't know what I was.
Yeah. Great. Can I get? Actually, I always had a desire to ask you, because it came up at this conference as well, Paulo Freire. And there is a part in that which is talking about that, you know, the oppressed people regain their humanity, right? To liberate themselves as well in a very humanistic way. It's a very, very important process, but also only the oppressed can liberate the oppressor. So what do you think about it in the context of RGPP? Can I start with Andreea? Oh. Because like you always feel that Lucija doing everything.
No, it's fine. I'm sorry for myself.
No. Just like, you know.
I wouldn't necessarily put it in the terms of gaining their humanity, because that's actually but I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's the basically the problem. Why do we put it in these terms, right? And what the hell is humanity? I think it's Freire, but it's also Verhoeks, maybe more than Freire, who inspired me personally to try to negotiate, to try to invite a relationship, also inspired by what the students bring and what they want, in which we teach each other how to survive. Because it is about survival, actually. It's, as I said in the morning, the nation state as this single model in which we have been taught to value ourselves is also teaching us in all sorts of very hidden and perverse ways to compare ourselves and to always calculate our value compared on what the other is. And of course, to be Roma, to be Black, to be woman is the perfect sort of object, transformed into an object in order to value yourself. So that's why I think it was wonderful that we could choose our readings. It was for the syllabi for myself to learn these things and to learn how to speak about them and to learn how to learn from my students. And the experience of how do you respond to knowing that the other making you into an object. What was the question?
Like, how shall we understand that the oppressors
Oh, liberated. That's my favorite topic. Okay, so I will just say one more sentence and then the others because I think it's a lovely subject actually. But I in these terms I'm totally. So it's really.
The other one is
okay. Okay, just when I was enjoying myself with what I said up now, I don't know what I will say. So I do think that yes, slightly repeating what I said in the morning, you cannot have a colonized or an enslaved without a colonizer, and so they are existing because of this. So it's a complex. It's a pathological complex. As Toni Morrison said, it's a kind of madness in the mind of the white people, and they are the first to suffer. But the perverse thing of being a citizen is that you do not even have the language to name your suffering. And then the only thing that you can do is to perpetrate all sorts of forms of violence to postpone facing your own situation, which is one deeply precarious in many ways. Mostly psychological. Fanon taught us this when we cannot feel it in our bodies because we have never learned how to feel it in our bodies. So yeah, liberation is profound and multidimensional. It's about liberating how you imagine who you could be if you were not white any longer, what kind of relationships you would have, what kind of collective life you would have if you would no longer enjoy your passage through Schengen, but think otherwise about how you travel. So yeah, I think the only way to address this complex is actually indeed to create practices through which the people who think they are privileged and enjoy privilege in many ways start to learn to shut up and to listen about their own alienation provoked by this sense that things should be in a certain way and should be reproduced in a certain way. I feel I'm starting to blab a bit, so I'll just pass it to whoever wants to continue. You did one.
Yeah, let me repeat the thing that now I feel I don't have anything to say. Also because it was somehow quite evident, especially because we always had these tutor sessions, right? It was always evident that, and it was, I guess, almost every month or on every occasion that someone would say, I feel that I'm learning as much as I'm teaching or something. Someone would say something along those lines every time. And I really kind of remember how to say that there was always someone who could exemplify this on every occasion. So that's one thing. But on the additional note, I don't. It's a long process to make all these things conscious. I think I wouldn't say that after every session it would become evident that, oh my God, I never elucidated this or that point, or it only came. No, it's months after, or sometimes years after, that I remember, wait, but that student said this like 3 years ago, and today it's something happened that made me remember and that made me realize what they wanted to say by this, or like another situation or another context. So I think it's something that we will carry with us for a very long time and only become aware of after a certain time of what we actually spoke about in these sessions. Sometimes, I don't know. So this is for me the kind of that it's not at all only the surface, but that there is much kind of a layered discussion that was going on, especially because also as Yuri, history and cultural heritage, and these are very, for such a program which is based in Romani history and cultural heritage, this is full of such points, because at least for me, it was, I knew it always intuitively and kind of relatively explicitly, also because I come from a very young country, let's put it like that, but I never realized actually how the nation state system and all the rights that precede the nation state system, minority protection and things like that, are very much based on promoting culture in different ways and so on. Of course, again, I knew it, but I just didn't know how direct the link is before I realized that when students come to me and talk about Romani storytelling traditions or whatever, they are actually very much talking about much bigger claims. And yeah, I hope this answers that.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. I keep thinking about a phrase that probably bell hooks used, like radical openness, and authority. You know, like Petra also mentioned the question of authority, and I was just this morning talking to a friend of mine about authority. Like that. Like I don't know. You don't want to, or you question authority. You are constantly doing that, but you cannot, or you do not. We cannot exist outside. Or authority, and that's always I think an ongoing question, like how you go about it, and that you need to be alert, and very often I think it happens that inadvertently you end up playing a role or doing something that sort of reproduces a form of authority that you know that it's not beneficial or it's not helpful, but you are there, and then luckily there is a process of learning. So it's not that I have just 5 minutes and then I either do something that cannot be revoked, but I have a chance to sort of even apologize, like for being I don't know, maybe insensitive, or as Lucija was saying, like much later you come to realize that that I was blind to certain things, and wow, now I kind of see things a bit differently, and I've learned something. So this oppressed dynamic. So it's I think we are constantly negotiating this, and I think I can be an oppressor in many situations, and I'm trying not to be, but I often, I think, end up being.
For me, it's a bit uncomfortable that I see my students here and I have to speak. I don't know. I hope I'm not skipping something that makes you uncomfortable. But one of the key issues is that it's very difficult to make certain generations understand what's academia about, and why we are going, why RGPP is preparing you for an MA, what will you do in an MA program, and what is this whole idea of knowledge production. And I think, also because of the background where we come from, both as graduates, but as Roma as well, that influences a bit our understanding, like we see it as something that we cannot reach, that even if we are trained to become experts. I remember I had this year a discussion with my group that, yeah, but we cannot write a thesis because we are not experts on the topic. Yeah, but you become an expert by reading, by preparing, by dedicating time to that. So we see it so far away that that's something that it's difficult for us to reach, or we cannot reach in many cases. And I'm very proud to see that many of the RGPP students, including some of my students, are actually doing that. Like developing toolkits, like Judit still around, I'm not sure. Developing toolkits on how you can engage with Roma civil society organizations or, you know, with Roma communities. So that's like a very factual point on how you can engage with this type of dynamics. So also with the research part, I'm trying as much as I can to kind of make students understand, you know, that even what you're writing in RGPP matters, can make a difference, can be considered of important scholarly work. Sunita's RGPP thesis, I use it for some work-related advocacy. So it's really good work what we are doing, you know. And I think the perspective that we bring as Roma students, as Roma, you know, intellectuals, experts, significantly can challenge all these barriers that we are encountering. So maybe it's not let's say an immediate outcome of the program now, but in the long term you can see it, and I highly associate that with the RGPP.
Petra.
So, all right, it's hard. So when I first read that Friday text, I thought I deeply understand it. I couldn't agree more. But then things happened, you know, further readings, further contemplation, further teaching and the RGPP, and it nuanced my understanding of this binary that he posits of the oppressed and the oppressors. Because one can be an oppressor in some contexts and one can be oppressed in other contexts. And most of us tutors are women in various Eastern European contexts. Oftentimes we are the ones who could be claimed to be oppressed. At the same time, our whiteness puts us among those who have more privileges, more entitlements, more possibilities. Therefore, if we do not have to our own whiteness, then clearly we are keeping up an oppressive structure. So I would a bit kind of dismantle this oppressed and oppressor. At the same time, coming to RGPP, and I've had experiences before from California, collaborating with women of color feminists, where I was called out for my whiteness, where I was held responsible for my whiteness, and where I arrived to a place of feeling guilty for my whiteness. And then coming to RGPP came the realization that guilt is a very paralyzing notion. One cannot become a tutor guilt-ridden. One cannot maintain the atmosphere of critical contribution, intellectual endeavor guilt-ridden. One cannot engage empathically with the other person guilt-ridden. And that I learned through practice, so through the environment created at the RGPP. But what was the most, let's say, helpful was all the love that was coming from my students. And in that sense, Friday is right, that there is a point where you want me as a white person coming from, in some ways, privileged backgrounds. It really was the love of those students of mine who actually had so much less privilege and had so much more to endure than someone of my social standing. And it was their love that broke through that barrier where I could see myself and reframe myself and contemplate myself differently and tell my narrative differently as a white person. So, yes.
Thank you. Would you like to add something, Vicky? Is it when I'm an oppressor or the white guilt?
Whatever.
Because I can talk about being an oppressor. Yes, I am, totally. And I think that I don't know. No, I will come up with my excuse. And my excuse is time. That kind of we as tutors and students are kind of supposed to develop skills in 10 months. Other people develop in 10 years. Whether it's language or other academic skills. And this is when I fear that I'm an oppressor, when at certain points, I think that though I believe that we each learn very differently, especially languages, but whatever, swimming or literature, differently. But now time is up soon. And then I'm sorry, students. And I think then I'm kind of, I turn into an oppressor because I feel that you won't be there and you will blame yourself. I mean, as a student. And I know the rhythm of the program better than someone who is doing it first time in their lives, which is completely legitimate. And so sorry. In an ideal world, these things would not happen in 10 months.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, sure.
Actually, I don't even know how this will play out because it's complicated. Just what Petra was saying about being accused of being white. That's one way of going about things, and it's in many ways legitimate or necessary. But in another way, speaking about discipline or things like that, I mean, it's more about the prior question of how a certain institution makes you think you are white, and then it's about it's also about the what you have to give up in order to perform those roles. Now, I will just give the example of my department, International Relations. When I was there in 2013, it was really impossible to ask certain questions or to go to do post-colonial, decolonial literature. There was no one there to teach you that. I didn't read it in my department. And now it's possible. But the question was that, okay, so what is the institution telling you that you can teach? So it's not about being... The oppressor is also oppressed, coming back to this point. And the white person is, I think I lost my idea. It was so much clearer in my head when you were talking. Because it really frustrates me, this sort of thing about guilt of being white, because class also has to be calculated in it. What if you're white, but you're coming from low labor, working class? Or had a very traumatizing family, or all sorts of other things. So the moment we actually look at each other as made by institutions, then all sorts of other things are circulating, which are invisible, which are beyond the... Of course, and I'm not denying that it's absolutely obnoxious. We also matter, of course. But otherwise, there's so many ways in which we could start asking ourselves what is circulating through us and making us in all sorts of things. And again, how can I help you, or how can you help me? How can we help each other to... I lost it again, sorry.
No, it was really great and actually very deep discussion. I didn't know that it's gonna play out in such a way, because even in the break as well, the girls, they kept me asking, well, what we're going to talk about? Tell us, what are the points? And I thought that just make it like very conversational. And I was really yearning to have this kind of discussion. And I think it was so rich and deep, and I'm so much grateful for you that you are with us, and we can co-create this space together. And And I think the humanity or the human value, what we try to nurture here, and I hope that, you know, we are on the way. I mean, of course, it's never-ending process. And I'm particularly happy because in this room today we have as well Viola and Michael here, who's actually for a kind of initiator of this program, or it's a kind of, you know, invisible allies in the background. Sometimes, you know, we went through various phases and stages, but somehow always we try to work out that how can we connect and relate to each others. And I think that's the way how we should do. I mean, it's not easy, and it's very challenging, but I'm just really grateful and very proud as well to work with you as teachers and tutors, and thank you so much. Thank you. Longer break, or would you like to add something?
Actually, Magda is closing and we are over.
Okay, Magda is closing right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that.
Martin, should I start?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, Lacio divas, Romale. Hello, everyone. What an amazing celebration of the 20th anniversary of the Roma Access program. Congratulations and heartfelt gratitude to all the alumni for your contributions throughout the years, and a big thank you to the CEU Romani Studies program team. I'm deeply honored to deliver closing remarks for a conference packed with engaging, intense, and above all, necessary research and dialogues about Roma youth, access programs, and higher education more broadly. But it feels like an impossible mission to capture the depth and richness that scholars, activists, and practitioners have brought to this conference. Your contribution covered a vast collection of interconnected issues, including neoliberalism and meritocratic norms, exclusion in egalitarian schools, individual rights and collective injustices, individual responsibility versus structural determinants of success, systemic and structural inequities, inequality and dominance, wideness, substantive equality, equality of opportunity, and equality of results, the politics of recognition and restitution, the emotional imprint or emotional cost of one's social background, self-positioning, loss of knowledge as an act of dispossession, epistemic activism, epistemic violence, epistemic power, and the tension between being shaped and actively shaping and producing social relations and power, social relations of power and inequality. You have examined access programs and higher education in Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Hungary, North Macedonia, Poland, Germany, Spain, and the UK, and have also discussed the experiences of Roma, Sinti, Sintese, and Romnia, Gypsy travelers, and Gitanos. Obviously, I cannot cover all of that in my concluding remarks, and I won't waste your time summarizing papers, but I want to briefly delve into three major themes that have been prominent throughout the conference, namely the CEU Roma Access Program, liberal anti-racism and the structural determinants of Roma education, and peripheries or margins. And I'll begin with the Roma Access Program and the broader concept of the university as both a tool and a space for Roma justice, as well as a locus for primarily market-friendly knowledge, as thoroughly unpacked by Judit Veres in her paper. And Judith, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. Over the past 2 decades, CU has become a pipeline for over 400 Roma individuals, facilitating their transition from bachelor's degrees in their countries to grad education in Europe or the United States. Notably, and I mentioned this yesterday, 8 in 10 RGPP graduates have secured acceptance into grad programs. So we could argue that neoliberals have already received sufficient incentives to invest in the program when considering cost, productivity, returns, and economic values. Economic value, but putting aside the necessary sarcasm regarding Western and neoliberal gajo thought, is crucial to highlight that many alumni actively engage in critical Romani studies as well as activism, journalism, policy making, and politics. Importantly, CU RAP alumni have recognized the urgency of transcending the gajo gaze and have taken charge of defining and redefining our Roma culture, identities, and history through our own lenses. Some CEU RAP alumni and faculty have been involved in a contemporary Roma cultural revolution, which partially transpires in the work of Rome Archive or ERIAC. This emerging Roma equivalent of the 20th century negritude movement, which celebrates this time around Roma culture, constitutes a significant development. However, it represents only one piece in an ocean of necessary structural changes and transformation in our society and in our gradual uprising against and opposition to anti-Roma racism. So once again, kudos to all the alumni and thank you for all you do. It's now time for donors to ensure continuity, stability, and enhancement of the CU programs and research. Yesterday, Violeta Zentai emphasized that institutions and structures, including universities, can serve as drivers of social change. However, as she underlined, they also reproduce social and human hierarchies deeply seated in systems of oppression. And I will leverage her argument to introduce the second topic of my remarks, which revolves around the tie between structural determinants of Roma education and liberal anti-racism. This idea has been particularly influenced by Milena's examination of exclusion and power structures in egalitarian schools in Finland, as well as Judith's argument regarding the tension between the idea of individual responsibility versus the structural determinants of attainment in education. We know that Gypsy lawyerists have traditionally scrutinized Roma education through the lenses of cultural determinants, whereas much of Romani studies has delved into the social determinants of education. Yet Justina and Simona, along with Juliana and many of you there in the room, have encouraged us to shift our attention towards the structural determinants of education and the structural determinants of educational attainment. And indeed, as I underscored yesterday, the liberal focus on individualism and individual rights has long neglected the collective and transgenerational nature of many inequities and injustices impacting Roma education. More so in many countries, including Bulgaria, for example, as Martina and Ogi underlined yesterday, and I quote, ethnocentrism is an established phenomenon in the Bulgarian education system. Beside, during the roundtable on the pedagogy of access to education today, the tutors and some participants emphasized issues related to a broad colonial Western gajo pedagogy, but also language injustices at all levels of education. And they also talked about the politics of and the hierarchy between the so-called gajo rationality and Roma subjectivity. Yet we know that knowledge is political, including gajo knowledge about Roma, which often is also biased. Who has an interest in keeping the system of oppression in place? Not Roma for sure, but that's a long conversation. Getting back to the roundtable, the tutors also discussed emotions, learning, and knowledge production, highlighting how the students' lived experience of anti-Roma racism, coupled with a deep sense of responsibility to their family and community, leads to both pain and a calling, a vocation, and a moral commitment to true justice, if we are to use the words of Professor Cornel West. That in the absence of Roma, including Roma staff, stories, images, and history from pedagogy, curricula, and school spaces, as well as a distortion of our history and culture, this absence stands as one of the many invisible or scantily addressed dimensions of anti-Roma racism. In fact, it is invisible mostly to the Gaje, as Roma, including Roma children and youth, see and feel the erasure, injustices, and the power of intracoloniality. Moreover, liberal anti-racism, which is pervasive in Europe, has long assumed that racist beliefs drive individuals within institutions to enact racist policies, and has addressed racism or other or more so discrimination, mostly from that narrow perspective. However, as structuralists C.L.R. James and Fanon underscored, racism is structural and beliefs are emotional or intellectual unfoldings of oppression. Therefore, anti-racism should translate into radical collective action to transform societies rather than just liberal education to transform beliefs. At the same time, as the research of some panelists presenting at this conference has shown, pledges to positive action, affirmative action programs, quota systems, and access programs are effective. Yet they too could be strengthened by coupling them with more structural interventions aimed at breaking oppression, power imbalances, and human hierarchies. Therefore, within this framework, a new theory, and more importantly, a new praxis of justice would entail both recognition and redistribution, as emphasized by Jethro, drawing from the contributions of Taylor and Fraser. Moreover, it would also require intentional decolonial and anti-racism theories, laws, practices, cultures, epistemes, processes, and practices addressing structural dimensions, continuities, and legacies of anti-Roma racism, racial capitalism or neo-feudalism, and intracoloniality across Europe. Lastly, please allow me to briefly touch upon the concept of peripheries or margins, a topic that Angela and Prem thoroughly discussed yesterday. Peripheries only exist in relation to or because centers exist. Therefore, when analyzing the Roma experience as a periphery, who is considered the core, the power, the hegemony? And I would say that for generations, the Roma people have grappled with a double jeopardy of oppression and human hierarchies stemming from both within countries and between countries, thus spanning from the divide between the West and East and national and local power mechanisms. Within the realm of scholarship, we know there is a long intra-European tension between superpowers and peripheries, which constantly centers or create differential power and force each gajo regime of truth, in Foucault's words, to have a particular level of power and influence or not. Yet the gajo-led canonical authority over the Roma realities is reflected both in the enduring Western hegemony and the Eastern peripheries. Still, as Angela beautifully put it yesterday, from the margins, Roma voices and our allies have managed to bring change, oppose the gajo gaze in the scholarship and beyond, oppose patriarchy and heteronormativity, and think and imagine the world in more just, daring, and creative ways. Finally, as Prem invited us, I hope we continue to demand the world to co-center our realities and work in solidarity with others, particularly historically oppressed, marginalized, and discriminated against groups and communities in national, regional, and global matters. Thank you all very much. We are proud of and grateful to the RAP and RGPP tutors, faculty, alumni, administrators, leaders, and current students. Thank you, Angela and Martin, and your entire team for your work and for offering us a platform, a space, a community to share ideas and continuously shape and reshape critical Romani studies.
Great.